At first glance, this video of a man unboxing gifts looks completely normal.
Oh no. Okay. I don't think I got all of this.
But if you watch closely, you'll soon realize there's something deeply disturbing behind it. The gifts weren't meant for him at all. Their real owner was already dead somewhere inside the house. The people in this video were strangers, men with a violent past, who would go on to commit even more brutal acts that day. Before we dive into this case that will show you just how far a parent will go to save their children, please consider subscribing. It helps us bring these important stories to light and keeps the memory of victims like Kay Tide and Beth Potts alive. Ralph Tide was born on September 29, 1939 in Germany. When he was just 11 years old, he and his mother immigrated to the United States, searching for a fresh start and the American dream. In his early 20s, Ralph met Kay Tidwell, a bright, warm-hearted woman born on January 16, 1941, in Nevada. Her parents, Eugene and Beth Tidwell, had raised her with strong values and an even stronger sense of family. Ralph and Kay fell in love quickly. They married on May 24, 1963 in Salt Lake City, and soon after they relocated to Humble, Texas, where Ralph worked as a salesman. Both were deeply devoted to their faith as active members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And more than anything, they dreamed of having a big, loving family. But in the first few years of their marriage, Kay and Ralph struggled to conceive, so they made the decision to adopt. Their first child was a daughter named Linnae. 3 years later, they adopted a son named Sean. And then, just weeks after bringing Sean home, Kay discovered she was 2 months pregnant with their biological daughter, Tricia. Life was good. Ralph's career flourished, and in 1969, he opened his own company, Skyline Equipment Incorporated, in Houston. Kay stayed home to raise the children, pouring her heart into making sure each of them felt loved, supported, and safe. Every year, without fail, the Tide family made a pilgrimage to their remote cabin in Oakley, Utah, a tiny mountain town with a population of just 600 people. The cabin itself was incredibly secluded. It sat 4 kilometers from the nearest road, surrounded by towering aspen trees and a crystal-clear river that looked like something out of a postcard. Kay loved that cabin so much she gave it a name, Tiade's Tranquility. It was her escape from the noise of the world, a place where the family could disconnect from everything and just be together. No distractions, no schedules, just mountains, fresh air, and the people she loved most. Getting to the cabin in winter was an adventure in itself. You had to park your car at the base of the mountain, load everything onto snowmobiles, and ride 4 kilometers up a winding trail to reach the front door. It was isolated, it was peaceful, and for nearly 20 years, it had been their safe haven. Every December, the Tides hosted an annual Christmas party with close friends and extended family. It was tradition, it was sacred, and in December of 1990, they planned to do it again. But this Christmas would be different, because 2 men with violent pasts and nothing to lose had already found the cabin, and they were waiting. On December 20th, 1990, Kay Tide and her 17-year-old son Sean flew from Texas to Utah. Kay's sister, Claudia, picked them up at the airport and drove them to the staging area where they kept their snowmobiles stored in a garage. They loaded up their luggage, their groceries, and their Christmas gifts, and began the ride up to the cabin. The temperature had dropped to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Brutal, bone-chilling cold. The kind of cold that makes your lungs burn when you breathe. Halfway up the mountain, Kay, Sean, and Claudia passed a man walking alone on the trail. He looked to be in his early 20s, but something about him was off. He was wearing jeans, tennis shoes, and a thin jacket. No gloves, no hat, no snowmobile. In negative 20-degree weather, 4 kilometers from the nearest road, this man was severely underdressed and clearly out of place. Kay, being the kind and caring person she was, stopped her snowmobile and asked if he needed help. The man didn't respond. He didn't even look at her. He just quickened his pace and disappeared into the trees.
It was just my mom's favorite place on earth to be. She loved getting away from Texas, being able to be in snow-covered white Christmas, and that was our family dream. We looked forward to that every year, to get to be able to spend our Christmas vacation together in the mountains with our family.
Kay found the encounter unsettling. When Ralph arrived the next day with their daughters Lainey and Tricia, she told him about the strange man on the trail. She asked him to bring their shotguns up to the cabin, just to be safe. Ralph didn't think it was necessary. Oakley was one of the safest places you could imagine. In the past 100 years, there had only been one violent incident in the area, a road rage shooting, and a handful of burglaries. Crime simply didn't happen there. But Kay insisted. She had a bad feeling. So Ralph loaded 2 shotguns onto his snowmobile and brought them to the cabin. On the evening of December 21st, the family spent the night at Kay's mother's house. Beth Potts was 72 years old and had lost most of her vision and mobility in a car accident 7 years earlier, but she was still sharp, loving, and fiercely independent. The family enjoyed a warm dinner together, laughing and catching up before heading to bed. The next morning, December 22nd, Kay, Beth, and 20-year-old Linnea loaded up the snowmobiles and headed back to the cabin around noon. Ralph and 16-year-old Tricia stayed behind to run some last-minute errands. They'd follow a couple hours later. As the 3 women approached the cabin, Linnea noticed movement inside. A shadowy figure in the master bedroom window. She smiled, thinking it was her cousin David arriving early to surprise them. She was excited. Linnea jumped off the snowmobile and ran inside, heading straight to the kitchen sink to warm her frozen hands under hot water. She was still smiling, waiting for her cousin to jump out and surprise her. And then she saw him. A man with wild frizzy hair stepped out from behind the refrigerator. He wasn't her cousin. He was a stranger, and he was holding a gun pointed directly at her face. The man with the frizzy hair forced Linnea to call her mother and grandmother upstairs. As Kay helped Beth climb the steps, a second man appeared, shorter, wearing thick Coke bottle glasses, and pointed another gun at them. Kay immediately started pleading with them. "What do you want? Why are you here? Please, I'll give you anything. Just don't hurt us." Without hesitation, the man with the frizzy hair shot her. As Kay fell to the ground, he turned the gun on Beth and fired. Beth tried to crawl away, desperate to survive. He shot her again and again. Under his breath, he muttered, "This bee won't die." Linnea was dragged into the bedroom. The men duct-taped a dirty sock over her mouth and tied her hands and feet with rope. Then, in a bizarre and almost cruel gesture, the man with the glasses brought the family dog into the room, as if to comfort her, while her mother and grandmother lay dead just outside the door. Linnea's mind was racing. She knew her father and sister were on their way, and there was no way to warn them. At 2:45 in the afternoon, Ralph and Tricia pulled up to the cabin. The man with the frizzy hair grabbed Linnea, held a gun to her back, and dragged her outside. The man with the glasses pointed his weapon at Ralph and Tricia, ordering Ralph to empty his pockets. Ralph looked into his daughter Linnea's eyes. She was terrified, and in that instant, he knew. Kay and Beth were gone. He pulled out $105 from his wallet and held it out. "Please," he said, "I'll give you everything. Just don't hurt my girls." The man with the frizzy hair looked at his accomplice and ordered him to shoot Ralph. The second man raised his gun, aimed it at Ralph's chest, and stood there. 30 seconds passed. He couldn't pull the trigger. So the man with the frizzy hair raised his own gun and aimed it at Ralph's face. He pulled the trigger. But then again, nothing happened. He pulled it once again. Still nothing. On the third attempt, the gun finally fired. The weapon was loaded with birdshot, a type of ammunition used for hunting birds. Instead of a single bullet, the shell contained dozens of tiny metal pellets. At close range, they tore into Ralph's face, shredding skin and embedding deep into his skull. His eyes swelled shut almost instantly. Blood poured down his face and neck. Tricia started screaming. She was 16 years old, watching her father get shot in front of her, and there was nothing she could do.
And the one with the ski mask drew the hammer back and aimed and clearly was having a hard time doing it. So the other one that had my sister pulled his gun out and aimed at him, fired twice, and it misfired. The third one went off and hit my dad. My dad fell. My sister and I ran to each other. I held her tight and I said, "Lene." She just stayed silent. I said, "Lene, Mom?" She shook her head. Graham shook her head. And I said, "Are they both dead?" She shook her head, yes. I just held her tight and I said, "It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay." And at that moment, the feeling to survive kicked in almost like an animal instinct. Something I'd never experienced and don't ever want to experience again. And right then, our minds came together and we knew we had to come up with a plan. So Lene and I immediately started doing what they told us to do.
The men grabbed cans of gasoline that the family used to fuel their snowmobiles and began dousing the inside of the cabin. They poured it on the furniture, the walls, the floors. Then they walked back outside, poured gasoline over Ralph's body, and shot him again, this time in the back of the head, just to make sure he was dead. They set the cabin on fire and ordered Lene and Tricia to load the snowmobiles with everything they'd stolen: guns, cash, jewelry, food. Then they forced the girls to drive the snowmobiles down to the garage while they followed behind, guns aimed at their backs. Ralph Teedy lay in the snow, his face destroyed, gasoline soaking into his clothes, flames beginning to spread across the cabin behind him. The men assumed he was dead, but they were wrong. After the snowmobiles disappeared down the trail, Ralph forced himself to move. He didn't know how long he'd been lying there. Minutes, maybe. But he knew one thing. His daughters were in danger, and he was the only one who could save them. His face was shattered. Blood dripped from the dozens of pellet wounds and froze into icicles on his cheeks. His eyes were so swollen he could barely see. But he stood up. He tried to enter the cabin to put out the fire, but the flames had already spread too far. The heat was unbearable. His jacket caught fire and began melting into his skin. He ripped it off, stumbled outside, and collapsed in the snow. Years later, Lene would say, "My dad had been shot twice. He'd been doused with gasoline. He caught on fire and had to tear off his snowsuit while burning. And then he got on a snowmobile and raced down that mountain to save my sister and me. In freezing temperatures, barely able to see, covered in blood. My whole life, my dad was my hero. That day just put an exclamation point on it." Ralph found a snowmobile and drove 4 kilometers down the mountain, no jacket, no helmet, his face a mask of blood and ice. He passed his brother-in-law, Randy, who was heading up to the cabin for the Christmas party. Randy didn't recognize him at first. Ralph's face was so mangled, so swollen, that he looked like a stranger. But then Ralph started speaking, and Randy understood. "They killed Kay, they killed Beth, and they've got the girls." Randy lifted Ralph into the back seat of his car and immediately tried calling 911. The call dropped, no signal. He tried again and again. Finally, on the 4th attempt, the call went through. While Randy was frantically calling for help, the 2 killers were speeding down Canyon Road with Lene in the front passenger seat and Tricia in the back next to the man with the glasses. They told the girls they were driving to New York, and once they got there, they'd let them go. Lene and Tricia didn't believe them for a second, but with guns pressed against them, they had no choice but to stay quiet and hope for a miracle. Then a police cruiser passed them. The officer looked directly at the car, made a U-turn, and began following. The man with the frizzy hair, whose name was Von Lester Taylor, slammed his foot on the gas pedal. The car shot forward, reaching speeds of 90 miles per hour on icy mountain roads. Taylor blew straight through a police roadblock. Other officers joined the chase. Sirens screamed from every direction. 65 kilometers from the cabin, the Lincoln spun out of control and slammed into an embankment, getting stuck in the snow. Tricia and Lene looked out the windows. Police surrounded the car, weapons drawn. Civilians with hunting rifles stood alongside them. The girls held hands, ducked low, and prayed they'd make it out alive. The two men were dragged out of the car, forced to their knees in the snow, and arrested. Not a single shot was fired at the hostages. Tricia and Linnae were safe. Meanwhile, Ralph Tiede was airlifted to a hospital in critical condition. Doctors didn't know if he'd survive, but against every statistical probability, he did. When investigators arrived at the cabin, they described it as a war zone. Blood spatter covered the walls and staircase. Bullet holes punctured the wood. One round had traveled completely through the banister and embedded in the opposite wall. The entire structure reeked of gasoline and burnt hair. Dr. Sharon Schnicker, the medical examiner, testified that Kay Tiede had been shot 5 times, twice in the chest, once in the side, once in the shoulder, and once in the upper arm. The fatal wound entered through her shoulder and tore through internal organs. Beth Potts was shot 3 times, twice in the chest and once in the head. The head wound killed her instantly. Both women were murdered with a .44 caliber handgun. Inside the cabin, investigators found something chilling: a video camera. The tape was still inside. And when they played it back, they saw Von Taylor and Edward Deli opening the Tide family's Christmas presents, laughing, calling out which family member each gift belonged to before tearing through the wrapping paper like children.
I don't know. Okay. I don't think I got all of this.
How come you got a light flashing on the front of that?
I don't know.
Find out.
How am I supposed to find out?
Where's the instructions? And Lene. Come on, pass that. Oh, wow.
What is it?
Baseball card.
Okay. Let's see a couple of them.
Oh, there's football and basketball.
Show them this way. Turn them this way. Okay. Next page.
They had been living in the cabin for hours before anyone arrived, sleeping in the beds, eating the food, treating it like their own personal hideout, and the whole time they were waiting for the family to come home. Von Lester Taylor was 26 years old. Edward Stephen Deli was 22. Both were parolees. Taylor had served time for aggravated burglary. Deli had been convicted of arson. They met at a halfway house after their release and escaped together on December 14, 1990, 8 days before the murders. For over a week, they burglarized cabins throughout the area, stealing guns, food, and anything else they could carry. On December 20th, the same day Kay Tiede encountered a strangely dressed man on the trail, Von Taylor was spotted near the cabin. He was scouting it, planning his next move. And here's the part that makes this case even more infuriating. On December 22nd, just hours before the attack, Von Taylor called another resident at the halfway house, a man named Scott Manley. Taylor told him everything. He said he was at the Tiede cabin. He said he was waiting for the family to return. He said he planned to kill the parents and the son, kidnap the daughters, steal their car, and use the girls as human shields to escape to New York. Scott Manley immediately reported this to halfway house officials, and they did absolutely nothing. Von Taylor pled guilty to 2 counts of capital murder in exchange for the dismissal of all other charges. At his sentencing hearing, he showed 0 remorse. He was cold, argumentative, and completely detached from the horror he'd caused. Ralph Tiede took the stand. His face still bore visible scars from the birdshot pellets. He looked directly at Taylor and told the jury what it felt like to be shot twice, set on fire, and left for dead, only to crawl down a mountain to save his daughters. The jury sentenced Von Taylor to death, 2 consecutive death penalties. Edward Deli chose a jury trial. His lawyer argued he was simply in the wrong place with the wrong person, that Taylor was the ringleader and Deli was just scared and went along with it. Prosecutors fired back, pointing out that Deli had spent a week burglarizing homes, kidnapped 2 teenage girls, and only hesitated to kill Ralph because he lacked the guts, not because he had a conscience. After 12.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Deli guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. In 2001, Linai Tiede received a letter from Edward Deli. He apologized. He said he wasn't the same person anymore, that he was just a scared kid back then, but now he was a man who understood the weight of what he'd done. Linny read that letter over and over for 10 years, and eventually she decided to forgive him, not for his sake, but for hers, to lift the burden she'd been carrying. Ralph Tiede remarried and spent his remaining years surrounded by his children and grandchildren. He passed away from cancer in 2008. Tricia married and had 2 children. Sean became a salesman, just like his father, and Linnae married her childhood sweetheart, Nathan Coates. Together, they raised 9 children. The family rebuilt the cabin. They refused to let the men who destroyed their Christmas steal their sacred place. We go up there and we play. We relax. We bond. They took our mom. They took our grams. But that's where it ends. The cabin is healing, and it ends.